All right, now we're going to discuss sharpening and resizing in the same lesson because the two are intertwined and cannot be considered independent of each other, as some other tutorials on this subject would have you believe. I constantly see tutorials online that try to explain sharpening, and the instructors are well-meaning, but the vast majority of them say nothing about resolution or physical size of the image, which affects your settings. One setting applied to one kind of image will do nothing to that image with a different resolution and physical size. So you can't discuss sharpening without resizing in the same conversation. As I mentioned, these issues cannot be ignored if you really care about high-quality results. Now, let's look at this image of Kaylee, and at first glance, after we've done all the work on it that we did in previous lessons, at first glance it looks great, and it is great. Now, let's look at the full magnification on this, 100% magnification, by hitting Command 1 or Control 1, and this image is technically perfect. It's in focus, the face is in focus, her neck, hair, chest, everything is in focus, and it's a good image. Now, you can argue incessantly about the artistic nature of this image, but technically it's perfect. It doesn't need anything. Yet here's what happens, and this happened to me. I'm giving you a lesson that I had to learn the hard way about. Okay, so we go back to full view on the image, Command 0, and let's put on some sharpening. And the way you do that is come up to Filter, Sharpen, and we're going to go to a panel called Unsharp Mask. Now, ignore all of these. In my 25 years of using Photoshop, I have never used any of these other functions for sharpening. And don't ask me why they call it the Unsharp Mask. Only the people at Adobe know that. So there's the answer to that question. Nobody knows. All right, here, Unsharp Mask, and the panel has 3 settings on it, and amount, radius, and threshold. Now, what is sharpening? Sharpening is the perceived increase in contrast between adjoining pixels, which means if we go on this image to pixel level examination, then you can see the difference in contrast between the pixels in the image, which results in an optical illusion that makes the image appear to be more in focus or sharper, which is where the word sharpening comes from. Now this setting right here at 150% with 1 radius and 0 threshold, that's the default setting, and it really isn't affecting this image at all, maybe just ever so slightly, and I can't even see it sitting here looking at it, and I know you can't see it in the video, but there is a slight difference. On a high resolution image, and let's take a look at that, the image size means a lot, so let me get out of this, and we go image size, and we have a 1200 pixels per inch, 2300 by 3500 pixel image, and this is definitely a high resolution. It's also a 16-bit image, and it's also in the ProPhoto color space. So this image is as technically perfect as it can be. It doesn't need any sharpening, okay? All right, but let's look at what people do. Let's look at what I did when I first started sharpening. I did it all wrong, and I don't want you to do the same thing. All right, so let's go back to the Unsharp Mask panel, and the amount of contrast between adjoining pixels, and whether the radius stands for, are we going to measure that contrast in 2-pixel clusters or 5-pixel clusters, so we can change this setting to 2 pixels or 4 pixels? Or 5 pixels, or whatever it may be. The radius is a reference to pixel clusters. So one 5-pixel cluster is going to be adjusted for increased contrast against an adjoining 5-pixel cluster. Okay, threshold is a little more difficult to explain. I'm not sure I even really understand the technical ramifications of what this is. All I know is that in this image, let's pretend that this image is a 800 or a 1600 ISO image. Now, right now, it doesn't have any noise in it, but if your image had noise in it, you would set this threshold at about 2 or 3, depending on the severity of the noise. What you don't want to do is use sharpening to sharpen noise. You want noise to go away. You don't want to emphasize it. So therefore, you don't want to sharpen it, okay? And as I said here, I don't know how to explain it to you from a technical standpoint. Just trust me when I tell you, set this at 3 or 4 when you have an image that has these monotonish colors in it, okay? There's no contrast in here. And you don't need to sharpen an area of the image that doesn't have contrast in it. So set your radius on 3 or 4 on a high resolution image, and that way, if the image has noise, you won't be sharpening the noise, which is a bad thing. So these settings are just about right, and you can see the difference just barely, okay? Now, let's look at how to do it wrong. All right, we're going to take this amount up to 200, and you look at it, and you say, wow, that's pretty cool. I do see more detail in Kaylee's face, and her hair looks a little finer, and it does. I mean, on the computer screen, it looks better. It's an optical illusion, friends. All right, here's 300, and it's even sharper, and you're sitting there as a neophyte, as someone brand new to this process, and you say, wow, that looks even better. Well, what does 400 look like? There's 400. And lo and behold, you look at this and you go, wow, look at all that detail. Look at her hair down here and the clothes and whatnot. This is really a sharp image. All right, here's the difference. Before and after. And when you look at this over-processed, over-sharpened image, and then you go back to the original state, it looks downright blurry. Trust me, it's not. This is too much. This is perfect for a high-resolution image. For an image on the internet, we'll talk about that in just a minute. We're talking about high-resolution images that you might print. So we go like this, we go like that, and don't fall into that trap. Now, the best word of warning that I can give you is put the sharpening in there to a level that you can just barely see it. And even on an image like this, let's say you want to do an 11 by 14 on this image. As a print, you don't need any sharpening. Let me repeat that. You don't need any sharpening because sharpening looks horrible on prints. Doesn't look so bad on images that you use on the internet, but it looks horrible on prints, so don't use any sharpening if the image is sharp in camera. Okay? But if you have to sharpen, this is where you start. I would say even pull this threshold back down to 2 on this specific image. And then look at, you're constantly looking at before and after. Before and after. And that's about as much as I would give it. Now let's go ahead and resize this image. And we'll look at how resizing it changes the settings. And I'm going to go to pixels. We're going to use this image on the internet. Let's say it's 800 pixels high. And you click OK, and then we got full view of the image, and that's about how the image is going to be used on the internet. Now, the sharpening here is a little bit different. Okay, we're going to do it again. Filter, sharpen, unsharp mask, and the settings that we had for the high-resolution full view image is different than it will be for the internet. This is way, way too much sharpening for the internet. Okay, so we're going to back this down to 100%. And we're going to take this to 0.5 and 0 on the threshold, okay? Again, you apply sharpening only to the degree that you can just barely see it. And when you increase the sharpening, do so very, very sparingly. And don't sharpen the image above the point at which you can barely see it, which is right there. And I'm not sure you can see that on the video, but in my screen, that's about where you can start seeing it. Now, there is a case to be made for sharpening images that you're going to use on the internet because there's a million different monitors out there, a million different resolution of monitors that are in use, and so you have to kind of compensate for that. And sharpening is not necessarily a bad thing when you're going to use them on the internet. I rarely do it, but you might want to give serious thought to doing sharpening when you're going to use it on the internet. Now, that's at 150% at 0.5 and 0, okay? Let's look at 200, and let me see how that's before and after. Before and after, and I can see the difference, but to me, I just don't like it because I've developed an eye for bad sharpening, and that's really too much. So let me give you some numbers here that you might want to write down. 100, 0.5, and 0 are your 3 settings for images to use on the internet. For images that you're going to print, high-resolution images, you want to go to maybe 150 at 2 and maybe 1 or 2 on the threshold, depending on the image. If you have a 100 ISO image, then set the threshold at 0. You have no noise to worry about, so you can set the resolution. You can set the threshold at 0 and not hurt anything. So high resolution is 150 to 2 and 0. High ISO images, you should probably set the threshold at about 3 or 4. Sharpening is an art. It's something you have to learn to do, and the only way to learn it is to do it. In the next lesson, let's look at sharpening when you do have an out-of-focus image and what you might or might not be able to do to rescue that image in Photoshop.